I want to teach you how to add more bucks to your land. And we'll talk about the number of bucks maybe per acre that you can expect, maybe even with some different habitat types. But I think that's something that a lot of people want. They want more bucks on your land. If you have more bucks, then you push more to the next age class, you increase buck age structure. Really hard to have older bucks when you don't have more bucks on the land. You don't just get older bucks. You have to have more of a balloon where you have this number of bucks and you attain this age. You have more bucks, so overall you have more down here, and then you go up another age. And then certainly if you go more bucks, I mean there's definitely a limit to how many bucks you have, but you have to increase that bubble in order to push the age structure up. I want to talk about what I've done. And this is what I teach. This is what I've talked about for years. These are a lot of the points, the same points. But really, I practice what I preach. And this is our second year. In fact, we finished hunting tonight. So it was a bittersweet day. Dylan and I are actually enjoying a beer right now. And we're going to go have some pizza and watch some football right now with the family. My sons are around, so we're going to enjoy that later. But, you know, it's that time where it's really, I was reflecting a lot in the blind tonight. And you tend to do that this time of year. You think, you know, what could you have done different? What could we have done different tonight? But bottom line is we had a great season in Wisconsin and Minnesota. And it's a good time to reflect. And I want to talk about, there's no magic bean in doing this. We'll talk about the numbers in a second. There's no magic bean. What I mean by that is, I'm not going to tell you, even my mock scrapes that I talk about using all the time, they're free. If you count using a few cents of rope or string to attach the mock scrape to, they're free. I don't advocate any scents. I've had many scent companies that have sent me emails and want me to use their scent. They'll pay me, give me the free product, but I don't want to use it. And I don't want to use something and then say that I'm using it when I don't really believe in it. And so a little bit different hunting company that I have, because I go to a lot of clients a year. I sell books, web classes. I have good, solid sponsorships and partners. And that's where I don't need to, I don't want to, and I don't think I ever would use a product just to use it and get a check and get money. So it's a lot different, because most hunting companies that you see, wherever it's at on social media, the outdoor channel, wherever it might be, YouTube, the only way they're going to make money is if they have sponsorships. If they don't have those sponsorships, they can't pay their bills. That's not me. My sponsors are less than 20% of my income, my overall income. So just for comparison, I'm not going to tell you that you need to hunt with a certain scent elimination product or machine, because I don't believe in it. I'm not going to tell you that you have to use a certain scent lure on your mock scrape, because I don't believe in it. I'm not going to tell you that you have to use a certain call to call deer in, or a certain line of calls, because I don't believe in it. If you see me use an XYZ product, it's because I believe in it. A lot of times, many years before I formed any kind of partnership with that company, because I chose to use that product, not the other way around. A lot of people ask me about my change from Sitka to First Light. I like the team with First Light. I like the clothing. They're both high quality clothing companies, but I've really enjoyed all the layers. I'm wearing a layer right now. This is the furnace layer. I wear this quarter zip at least 2/3 to 3/4 of the season. I like the clothing, but I like the team. I like the chance to be on the ground floor of new products, be able to test. And so that was an easy decision for me. It's actually the only product or manufacturer that I've changed since I started taking sponsorships and partnerships 6 years ago. So I haven't changed any other partner, because again, I want to use this stuff for years, if I can, decades, because I believe in it. So in order to get more bucks on your land, you're not going to have to plant some magic bean that I'm getting paid a lot of money to tell you to plant. In other words, I'm only going to tell you what to do if I believe it and do it myself. And this is what's worked for me. I'm using my example this year with my second year, my land in Minnesota, and the changes we made each year has just been outstanding. How many bucks can you expect? Someone told me the other day that someone had asked them, and they were arguing back and forth, that you could have 80 bucks on 40 acres. Dylan, what do you think of that? 80 bucks?
Seems pretty high.
Seems
really
really
high to have, you know, $2 per acre. But
well, and you'd almost think you'd have to have a couple hundred does running around too. Yeah. So there might be an extreme case in Iowa, low cover area, 40 acres, surrounded by thousands of acres of ag land, really thick, maybe some diverse terrain, maybe, but probably not.
No.
No, okay, no. So Dylan's correcting me, no. So that's more what I think anyways. But anyways, what I've noticed, it's kind of interesting, you know, in Wisconsin, the property you've had there, I believe this was the 8th season we've hunted it. We hunted the neighbor's property for 12 seasons. So we have good perspective in that area, but on that property we have about 30 acres of cover. It's 52 acres, and we routinely get pictures on our mock scrapes, especially our inventory one down in the middle of our food plots. And we'll get a couple outliers here and there, but we'll get about 30 to 35 different bucks, including all age classes. Now, a third of those are just coming through and we get 1 or 2 pictures of them, handful at best. Even my muzzleloader buck, I don't think I had 4 or 5 partial pictures of them, that was it. Some of those bucks we get for a week or 2 here or there, and that's about it. And then some are in around the property regularly, meaning it's hard to go 2 weeks without getting a picture of them the entire season. And so we're taking an inventory of a huge snapshot of bucks. But what you find is if you do a good job with your property, you know, everyone's sharing these bucks in a neighborhood, let's say a neighborhood of a couple square miles, but there's going to be 1 or 2 properties in there that take a huge amount, an unfair amount of bucks compared to anybody else. What I find is most sections of land don't have those landowners or types of lands because it takes a lot. And I'm going to talk about what it took us in Minnesota to make those changes. But just know we're kind of maxed out in Wisconsin what we see. We're really happy with the number of bucks we see. We're really happy with the age class. And I'm not sure it really can get that much better unless the neighbors around up the game as far as getting older bucks. And we have one neighbor that does that. They've purchased a lot of acreage in the area, and it seems like our age structure has gone up a little bit because they have a little bit more control of the land. And over here in Minnesota, you know, starting number 1, I know how this land was hunted before we came. There were a couple stands that were hunted a lot. I find stands down in the woods, or still a couple down in the woods, that I couldn't imagine going down into some of those hollows without spooking a lot of deer, let alone walking 300 yards down in, halfway down the hill, getting into the middle of the hollow where I'm surrounded by land going up and not spook deer. So right away, just how interior some of those stands were used. And then on the outside, riding side by sides to a close proximity from a redneck, getting in the redneck where all the deer can see you getting in and out, and having a couple of those favorite rednecks and spooking a lot of deer every single time you hunt. In fact, the neighbors to the north, we purchased that land this year, or 67 acres. They always wished and looked for those deer coming from the land we bought because they were spooked. Those deer would go north. And so our first year, I have a text from one of the hunters to someone else I know, just saying something like, not in a terrible way, but they just said something like, they shared me the text and it said, something along the lines of, we haven't seen very many deer all this year. Sturgis is taking away all our deer with his food plots. But it's not just the food plots. It's how the land was hunted, because they had food plots before, and we'll talk about some of the changes of that. So there's a lot that goes into this. You know, that's one way to simply look at it. You know, we have food plots, and so we take all the deer, but that's only a small portion of the puzzle. And really it started with making sure that when we were going on and off the land, no matter where we hunted, no matter what kind of stands or blinds we're using or where they're at in the land, we couldn't spook deer. It doesn't matter what else you do, you can't spook deer. So if you're putting food plots in but you just spook more deer, then you're really hurting yourself and your efforts, and you're wasting a lot of value in the land. I mean, why buy a lot of acres if you're only going to get a small portion of those because you're spooking so many deer? So number 3, one of the things we really did and focused on was our food variety. Before, they had mostly all beans. All the beans were down to the dirt by October 1st. They were eaten heavily by does and fawns during the summertime. And so when you got into November, our real estate listing that we had, that we purchased, it was almost a little disheartening. I knew it was a good area. We had good bucks on the real estate listing, but probably 19 out of 25, 20 out of 25 bucks were all velvet pictures. So although there's some great bucks, they didn't have a lot of hardhorn. Now that was because I don't think they had a lot of cameras, but they had the same number of cameras in the summer that they did in the fall. So they were showing a lot more bucks in the summer than they were in the fall. And that's one bad sign. You know, it's a trend you want to reverse. So you start looking at, well, you start bad access, interior stands where you're spooking deer, and then a single source, single variety food that was putting more does on the land during the summer and bucks than in the fall. So right there, we needed to change the variety of the food. We got rid of the beans, put green blends in, and then we had a major cornfield around the house last year. Year 2, we added more corn around the plots in 3 other areas, and then we added more food in the new land we bought. We increased the greens that we had and the quality. We made sure we used the right fertilization. We used our plot start. We used our plot boost. So we really increased the amount of food we have overall on the property. So that food is one thing, because if we bring all those feed deer in the summertime and we don't have the correct food in the fall, it's not going to do us any good. If we don't have our strongest food during October, November, we're not going to do any good. If we bring all the deer in the neighborhood onto the property and then spook them, we're going to fill it with does and fawns because they can tolerate a lot of pressure and they want to stay, but they're not going to increase, we're not going to increase the number of bucks we have on the land. So really that food complexity was critical. Also, we offered the same amount of food throughout the entire property. So this year with all our plots, all our main plots, we have the same food mix, so there's no more reason for deer to be in one spot versus the other. We're not trying to jam all the deer in one central location or one area off to the side where they have to compete, or we're not putting all food sources in different types of food so that deer are going from one to the other back and forth. We put the same varieties in all the plots so that we have a stable population of certain bucks that are in certain areas most of the time and certain bucks that are in others. From one side of the property to the other, there's bucks that we've never seen in one location on the property versus the other. There's some more in the middle, some more on one end, some more on the other end, but they don't overlap a lot because we have food in each one of those areas. And that means we have small little micro movements of bucks. They're not all smashed together in one spot. And that's how you can increase the number of bucks you have just with variety and doing it right with your food plots throughout the land. I'm going to add one while we're talking right here. I just want to talk about number 8, our bedding areas. Number 4, screening. Something we started doing in year 1. We planted 6 acres right around there of switchgrass, maybe 5 acres. Add another 4 acres this year. All that switchgrass is going to be 6 to 7 feet tall. We already had 6-foot tall switchgrass in the back. We've done that so in a lot of our key areas we can get in and out of stand locations without spooking deer. I even converted one of the food plots, decent good food plot space, soil, converted to switchgrass so that I can access and not spook deer as much. All our food plots are lined in switch. We have some big switchgrass areas. The whole idea is so we can get on and off the property without spooking deer. We use corn on the outside right now, so that would at least screen us for right now while the switchgrass is growing next to it. So we have that dual layer of switchgrass and then corn. So not only can they not see us through the switchgrass, then you add the corn there, it's even another visible barrier. Even if they're feeding in the corn, we still have the switchgrass. So the screening was critical. And that allows us to get out. So we changed access, made sure that we have that screening at the same time. We've worked on our food sources, the same food source, the same variety across the entire parcel. You never ever want one type of food here, another type over here, because those deer, especially those does and fawns go back and forth. Those bucks go back and forth then when those food sources are peaking in nutrition and attraction at different times. And then you have dead space. You have dead bedding areas, dead stand locations, dead movements, water holes, mock scrapes. Because all the deer are on one side of the property or the other, you're going to cut the number of bucks you have to a third because you're jamming them all in one spot, especially those mature bucks. Those younger bucks can tolerate a little bit more stress and pressure, just like those does and fawns. When those bucks get older, they can't. I'm going to flip back here how many, and I talked about on our property in Wisconsin, we had 30, 35 bucks. It's interesting around here, we have 3 or 4 times as many acres, but we have probably 40 different bucks, somewhere around there. And this is a mixed ag area. When up at the UP in Michigan, I worked on my property from 99 to 2006. In 99, I saw 1 spike, 1 scrape, 1 rub. Fast forward to 2006, this is a big wilderness area. 1/3 the number of deer, 1/2 the number of deer as we have around here. Very poor deer population. 50% fawn mortality during the winter with winter severity and those deer moving to the yarding areas and then coming back. So not a lot of great winter habitat. It was a limiting factor anywhere, but especially in that northern area up in the UP of Michigan. Up there in 2006, I went from 1 spike, a couple pictures of them, 1 rub, 1 scrape, and fast forward to 2006, had pictures of 17 different bucks, passed 11, shot 2, so I had 13 bucks in front of me. Oh, in that case right there, with the addition of those bucks, something common you see is a huge increase in rubs and scrapes. So I estimated that I had about 50 scrapes and 200 rubs in 2006. So that was reflective of the age class of bucks and the number of bucks on the property. But different circumstance. Up there was up to 260 acres at one time, surrounded by public land. So 17 bucks was a lot in that area, 17 different bucks to get pictures of. And again, it was the same kind of ratio. Some were there regularly, some were there just a few times, and some were there just once or twice, just fleeting and coming through. So about the same And we had similar number of does and fawns overall spread out across the property. I see that in Wisconsin. We have 30, 35 bucks. We probably have 15, 20 does and fawns that would be different. Here we probably have 20, 25 different does and fawns, more like 40 bucks. That's spread over a really large area, almost a mile from one corner to the other. You could even say we have 15, 20 does and fawns, but it's probably more like 20, 25, I would say. When it gets up into that 30, 35 range, we'll start shooting 5 or 6 to bring the population down. Right now we're in a little bit more of herd building, especially does and fawns, and I don't think we're going to have a lot more bucks, next year than we do right now. If you're down in a central ag area with not a lot of cover, it's not uncommon in an ag area with good food sources to have a certain number of bucks. It might be 40 acres, you could have 15, 20 different bucks that are around. Might even have more. It just depends on the deer population in the entire area. But you're not going to have 80 on 40 acres. What we're talking about is kind of a max. Like here with 245 acres, you might end up with 40. But it's not like you go from 40 with 30, 35 different bucks and you just multiply that times 4 if you have 160. It's not the way it works. You're still drawing the same number of bucks from the same area. You're just putting a higher percentage of those bucks on your land by hunting them smart. The only thing when you have a larger parcel in that situation like we do here, we have a little bit more control. So we're going to be able to push that age structure up ourselves in one neighborhood by controlling more in the neighborhood than we do with a parcel that just has 30 acres of cover. So there's a big difference. Water holes. The deer love gravitating around those water holes. Now we're not attracting bucks from 2 miles away, 1 mile away onto the property because we have water. But what we are doing is saving bucks because we have the water. Meaning we're keeping them on the property a higher percentage of the time because they like to focus on that water pretty consistently. That means they're not somewhere else during the daylight hours. They might be somewhere else still at night. They're still making their 3-mile home ranges, a mature buck all over the place. But that water keeps them focused during daylight on our property. It also puts them in front of our stands, which is great. We get a lot of pictures over water holes. Of course, we have the mock scrapes, but the water holes help. The mock scrapes, they're defining movement. When a deer comes through a certain area, they're hitting it. Water holes are a little bit different. They will keep deer centered around a certain area, especially during the rut. We'll find that bucks move in and it seems like they're hitting that water every few hours during the rut. So it keeps them on our land a little bit more during the daylight and therefore it protects more. If it protects more, in the end, you have more bucks. So the water holes help a lot. More food. We added more food this year. We stretched it out over a larger area. And what we've done at the end of this year is Dylan and I were counting up. I don't know if we have 8, 9, 10 bucks next year. They're going to maybe 11 that we're going to be 4 years old and older. We have several that will be 5, 6 years old and older. And so we're at probably 4 or 5 bucks and might even be a little bit more, 4 or 5 that would be 5 years old or older, and probably another 5 or 6 that are 4 years old or over. So we're looking at a good number of bucks, probably double that amount this year than we did last year, so in year 2. And this, folks, this does not take a long time to change, especially because you have a neighborhood that has a lot of bucks in typical and most locations. Sometimes you're in herd building mode or buck building mode, but most of the time you're taking advantage of the buck population that's already in the neighborhood. You're collecting more on your land during the daylight because of your efforts, and then you're advancing more to the next age class. So we're not increasing our buck numbers that much the second and third year, but we are increasing our buck age structure because we're holding more. We're increasing our bubble size and getting more on the land, and food is a big part of that. I'll skip down to number 8 right here. We started working on bedding areas on the interior of the woods. A lot of times people think bedding is that lowest hole in the bucket. However, if you don't have food, you don't have deer to fill the bedding areas. So when we have diverse timber and we have a lot of topography change, we have a lot of areas that bucks can separate from hollow to hollow to hollow. We have several hollows that the deer can relate to, and draws and valleys, and so there's a lot of separation that relates to our food sources. So we have little micro movements of deer, and so bedding for us, it's not like we have a lot of open timber, but it's not like we have this flat open 40 acre where you can see from one side all the way through to the other. So bedding area is part of it, but in our case, unlike some of my clients, depending on the situation of open hardwoods or flat or terrain, bedding was not a priority. We did get some bedding done. Now that we have these bucks and we have these does, we have our food sources set, then I'm working on adjacent bedding areas in some of the heart of our property where we want to hold more bucks and create more browse. And that browse is so critical. And that's that next phase of what we're doing. But we had to have the food, we had to have our access, we put our water holes in, we did work on the bedding, but we're expanding that more during this off season too. Number of tree stands. On this property, they relied on just a handful of stands. In fact, the owner relied on just a couple that he liked to hunt. Instead, we have many different stands, many different blinds. We have 21, 22, 23. And I've always taken that approach. What's your favorite stand? Your favorite stand should be the next stand you shoot a mature buck out of, not your last. You have very short memory. I shot Kermit here in the first year of owning the property. He's about 169.25-inch buck. Beautiful buck that we watched. That was the one buck, that was the best buck on the property. I really wanted to get him. And I shot him. I hunted out of that stand twice this year. That's it. Didn't feel confident about it. Didn't see the sign around the area. I have a lot of other stands. If I have a stand or a blind in a location, I don't hunt it, it gets moved. If that stand doesn't get hunted for the entire year, I don't have that much confidence in it. Unless something strange happens in year 2, I'm getting rid of it and putting it somewhere else where I've increased and got to know my property a little bit, and I'll move that stand around. Bottom line is, though, we have a bunch of options. We have a lot of options, and those options keep us from burning out the land by going to the same 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, 7 stands over and over again. On a 40-acre parcel, typically there'd be 10, 12 stands, 9 stands. On an 80-acre parcel, that might jump up to 12 to 14, but you don't double it. On a 200-acre parcel, I don't typically see 25 stands. It's more like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, even on 200 acres. On 500 acres, there might be 25 stands, but you don't take 40, multiply it 20 times to 400 acres or 800 acres, and then multiply the number of stands, 10 stands, and then you have 200 tree stands or blinds. It's not the way it works. You're still covering movements. You just don't need as many stands per acre the more acres that you have, but you have to have those options. If you have 40 acres and you have 3 stands that you're hunting, you're probably woefully under the number of stands you need per acre. All this takes a lot of money. All this takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of resources of time and dollars. What I encourage you to do is, instead of owning 100 acres and only putting 5 stands on and 2 acres of food plots, I'd rather see you own 50 acres and put 5 acres of stands, 5 acres of food plots and 10 stands or 12 stands. Do the math and offer the right amount of food, access points, screening, stands, so that you can actually fill your property and do it right. There's a lot of properties that we go to that are very large parcels. They have a lot of holes in the habitat, and they're just not connecting the dots from one bedding area to the next, to food sources. There's a lot of gaps in between. And so you take a parcel that should have X number of food plots, stand locations, access points, water holes if needed in a dry parcel, and you cut that to 1/3 of what it should be. That means you're never gonna even come close to your potential. So I hope this makes sense. This is some of the stuff that we're doing right now. And we're adding more this year. We're adding a little bit more switchgrass. I'm adding pollinator blends because that helps the rabbits, helps the pheasants. I already added some of that. We're going to add some rabbit huts, and we'll show how to do that probably in our January deer chores. But we have a lot of work to do coming up, and we're working on it more every year. I take the time. If I don't have the time to work on the entire parcel and I can't have someone else do it or help me with it, I'd sell part of the land, because I want to have a complete parcel and work on it and maximize my number of bucks per acre on the land for the given area. Again, big wooded area, wilderness area, northern area, you're going to have fewer deer than these mixed ag areas and having that potential. Again, too, this access is so critical. Keeping from spooking deer is so critical. A lot of the management around here is big parcel management. You have 900 acres, 1,000 acres, 500. You can afford to make a lot of mistakes. You just throw out a bunch of corn and bean plantings and you go hunt. Just by the sheer size of the parcel, you're going to get some nice bucks. But there's a lot of people that aren't even come close to the maximum number of bucks per acre because they're not doing the things on this list. So I feel like we have a 245 acre parcel here. We'll probably compete with parcels that are 1,000 acres or more around here in the number of bucks, the quality of the bucks, how often we see them, the age of bucks, the type of deer herd we have on the property, because we'll do these things and they're not. And most people are not. They're not even close. So try to maximize the number of bucks that you have per acre by doing it right, and you'll find you're getting the most out of your dollars, your hard-earned time spent. And again, it boils back down to there's no gimmicks in this. There's no magic bean. It takes hard work and doing it right. And I hope that all these videos on the channel. If you haven't checked out my web class for designing your parcel, that was my first web class that came out in 2020. We've sold hundreds of those. People really like it. We sell it with a workbook. That's something that can get you in the right direction, as opposed to hiring one of us to come out for 5 times more or 6 times more the cost. It can really get you a long ways there, or just simply watching these videos. Check out the advanced hunting strategies portion, best whitetail habitat and wildlife habitat section, bedding area section. There's a lot that you can look at for habitat and hunting strategy to make sure that you're pointing in the right direction and maximizing, in the end, the number of bucks that you can find per acre on your land. Folks, I want to make sure you check out my web class video series, whether it's how to design your food plot program or how to design your property in general. And we have a new one coming out that'll be how to hunt the rut. But these bucks back here are a testament. Some of these bucks go back to 93. They're even in different states. I urge you to check out those web classes so that you can help yourself, help your land, help your hunt. The link is in the description. And also for those that have tried them out, I encourage you to offer some feedback in the comments below. Thank you.